Good morning. I'm Jim Rohr. I'm your brief host, actually the introducer this morning, and also a member of the Carnegie Mellon Board of Trustees. I'm also the chairman and CEO of PNC Financial here in Pittsburgh, and I think I'm very, very excited to be able to welcome you at this conference. I think it's very interesting that we have a conference called Renewing Globalization and Economic Growth in a Post-Crisis World. You know, we're in a crisis right now. It appears, fortunately, that we're coming out of it a little bit. But this conference, whether it's the G20 or this conference that we're here talking about today, really talks about partnerships in a globalized world rather than the segments that we've lived in the past. And I think all of us know that when we work together, we're able to do things that surprise us, actually. We're able to accomplish a great deal more than we might have in the past, working independently. When I think of Pittsburgh, I think that's exactly why the G20 is here. I've been here for a long time, not as long as Ambassador Rooney, but not very many people have been, so you know. But when I think back in the 80s, we lost 250,000 steel-related jobs, and it was a disaster for the city, and unemployment went rocketing up, and we lost some population. 30 years later, we now sit here, 25 years later, we sit here with a 7% unemployment rate, 2 full percentage points below the national average. Last August, we had the highest employment we ever had in the history of the region, and on 2 occasions in the last 7 years, we've been named the most livable city in the United States. We have arguably the best cultural district. We have the best football team. We have the best baseball park. We have the best hockey team. We have the shortest commute. According to Sunday Magazine, we have the best view that comes off of Mount Washington in the entire United States. We have arguably the best healthcare system in the world here in our region. And it's because people came together and worked together in a way that they hadn't before. They took the opportunity to work together and build a region that was totally different than it was in the past. We lost the industry that drove us. But I will tell you that I can think back in not too long ago where the Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh didn't speak. They were in competition with each other for students, reputation, for money. Every single facet of their organization didn't work together. It totally changed when we think about Jerry Cohen and Mark Nordenberg and how they have come together to create a university center here that is greater than it was in the past. You think of UPMC and the way it's worked in the region. It's different than it was in the past in the way UPMC works with Carnegie Mellon. You can take the foundations, the corporations, the Financial Service Center, our PNC's delightfulness in hiring CMU students. When you think about the quantitative math programs they've put together, it's the way people have worked together that has made the region so much better than it has been in the past, and CMU is a very, very big part of that. Our next step in a global world is what the G20 is all about. How do we get people to work together? Being in the banking business, there's a lot of notoriety around that these days. It's a global business. It's not a regional business. It's a global business. We have a product, Virtual Wallet, that's an online product. You can use ATMs anywhere in the world. You get notified when you're going to have an overdraft on your cell phone. I see a lot of young people here. We've opened that account. We have 100,000 users in a matter of months. It's a global business. And there's nothing that used to be more regional, more local than banking. Nothing. But the world has changed. And that's what today is about. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to work with the Atlantic Council here. It's a group that comes together and thinks deep thoughts about these deep things and stimulate dialogue on some of these international issues and to try and build consensus. Now, we know there is no such thing as total consensus, but similar thought processes in order to partner toward the common good. And I think this conference is exactly that. You'll be hearing, there'll be a full report from this. It'll be coming out on the www.cmu.edu, and I think all of you will enjoy reading that. I'd like to acknowledge 2 people. Dr. Kieran Skinner, where's Dr. Skinner? Good, hello, and Alexei Montserrat for their efforts in putting this together. If you two could stand, please, and just get you're already standing. Thank you very much for putting this together. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to the person who actually runs this whole thing, the president and the CEO of the Atlantic Council. This is an individual that has extraordinary experience, spending over a quarter of a century with the Wall Street Journal. He's seen many of these partnerships come and go. So with that, let me turn it over to Fred Kempe, President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. Fred?
In the great history of such events, Jim's the introducer of the introducer, and I'm going to introduce Ambassador Rooney, but I also make a couple of remarks. Jim, thanks very much for that. This is a crucial time that we all come together. It is an inflection point. And like inflection points in history, you know you've had a crisis. You know you've had a crisis that has brought you to the point of critical decisions of many respects under time pressures where you don't get everything exactly right. But the question is, where do you come out in the other end? As a longtime Wall Street Journal editor and correspondent, I like images. And so one image we've played with, and I did this with President Cohen in the foreword of the very good book of articles and writings that you'll see and you'll have here, is a ship that almost sunk, but we now have it afloat again, and we think it's going pretty much now in a better direction. But we have to give it the right direction. It has to be steered in the right way. We have some wind at our backs, but but we're still going to get through some choppy water. So that's sort of nice. But the one I like better was given to me by a very senior U.S. official on an off-the-record basis, where he said, we've fallen down a mountain. We've got broken bones, we're bleeding, and we've hit rock bottom, and we're just grateful to be alive. And then we see some green sprouts underneath us. We see some flowers coming out. And then we look to the side and we see it's actually all fog and cloud to the side. And we're actually not sure we're at the bottom of the mountain. And so at the same time that we're climbing back up, trying to make sure that we're on stable ground, we also have to make sure that we don't fall back down a lot more mountain and be hit by another crisis. So that's a nice image for, I think, where we are right now. We think we've hit some sort of bottom, but we don't really know whether we're going to be pushed down further. But in the meantime, we have to build that bottom that we have so it's much more stable, and so that when we climb, we're going to do it in a much more sustainable way. I am the president of the Atlantic Council. I'm pleased to be here for this timely, important event. What the Atlantic Council does and has been doing for 48 years is we've been working to promote and to support the transatlantic relationship. But our new mission is renewing that relationship because we think the relationship's in need of renewal for 21st century global challenges. If you're looking at the global economy, if you're looking at the problems around the world, they won't be solved by U.S.-European closer cooperation coordination, but U.S.-European coordination cooperation will be a precondition for solving almost all of those problems. The Atlantic Council has been known for its work on security issues, on NATO, on hard security issues, but we've expanded a great deal now into business and economic issues by launching our Global Business and Economics Program. Alexa Montserrat was introduced. This really has been his work together with Chiron and Carnegie Mellon, and we have established a strong presence on G20 and financial crisis issues. We've worked alongside two major institutions, Chatham House in London and Carnegie Mellon University, to assemble around the last two G20 conferences, the foremost thinkers and business leaders in advances of these summits to address the crucial issues raised by the dangers to the world financial system. The publication that we released 2 weeks ago for this summit and for this meeting, you'll hear many of the writers from that publication speaking here today, and other distinguished business leaders such as Steve Forbes. And what I found in Washington is people are running so quickly just to attend to the daily problems they have to attend to, that the ideas coming from the outside, if properly infiltrated and if strong enough, really do have a great influence on what decisions get made. You'll hear a lot today about global growth. You'll hear a lot about how do we create it in a more balanced and more sustainable way. Coincidentally, that's also where President Obama is now pushing. We landed on that approach last summer because we thought that was the way it had to go. And it's always nice to be able to take credit for presidential policy. I'm not sure we can quite say that, but I think we did predict where matters now have to go. Let me sincerely thank Carnegie Mellon University, President Cohen, Jim Rohr, and the Board of Trustees, and Professor Kyron Skinner for their excellent partnership. We hope to do more with you in the future. Let me also thank the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Gary Littman is here from the Chamber, and Myron Brilliant and Arthur Rotkopf, who I'd like to thank for their strong intellectual and financial support, but also in an ongoing way we've done partnership and worked together with the U.S. Chamber. And thanks to all the panelists and authors. Finally, I'll just say this is a crucial moment. There are some good signs. 2.7% rise in retail sales. First time we've been in that position for 3 years. Household wealth has risen by $3 trillion in the first quarter. That's the biggest growth since 2007. Unemployment's still a pretty worrisome thing, but we're seeing certain trends in unemployment that are looking a little bit better. So there are some good signs. But now the G20 has to face a difficult task of building a platform for reliable and balanced growth that spreads the benefits of globalization broadly and deeply. We have to learn the lessons of the crisis we went through, but we also have to be careful not to learn the wrong lessons. Stephen Harper, the Canadian Prime Minister, was in Washington last week, and he was warning the administration against protectionism. He was warning against some of the Buy America approaches that are sneaking into legislation. If the U.S. goes protectionist, you can assure yourself that the rest of the world will. And if the U.S. doesn't go in that direction, you can assure yourself that we have a much better chance that we can also avoid the worst side of protectionism, or we have a better chance of avoiding the worst sides of protectionism elsewhere. So finally, we've put together this conference to formulate the way forward that we think would be best for the G20 in making this vision a reality, learning the right lessons from this crisis and not the wrong lessons. Instead of just focusing on technocratic efforts to prevent the last crisis, we're looking forward to identify what's needed to foster the emergence of a new 21st century economy that will be less vulnerable to shocks. So now I'm going to move to the most important part of this morning, and that's Ambassador Rooney. I did commiserate with him last evening on the fact that his Pittsburgh Steelers didn't give him the best welcome on Sunday. And being European, I've been practicing my soccer kick, and I think I can give the Pittsburgh Steelers a little bit of help against Cincinnati this Sunday if you feel you need a different place kicker. But to start off on this thing, I want to say that introducing Ambassador Rooney in Pittsburgh is a little bit like introducing Caesar in Rome. But it is my duty. After growing up in Pittsburgh and graduating from Duquesne University, Ambassador Rooney began working for the Steelers, his dad's team, in 1960. I learned a lot last night about the beginnings of this team in 1933 when there were blue laws where you couldn't play on Sunday that had to be dealt with. So from that point on to now, you and your family have dealt with all the challenges of running one of the most extraordinary businesses and sporting teams in the world. You took over as president in 1975, successfully managing the franchise until 2003. And under your tenure, the Steelers have won 6 of 7 Super Bowls in which they've played. For your outstanding stewardship of the team and for your great contributions to the National Football League, in August of 2000, you joined your father in the NFL Hall of Fame. And I believe you're only the second father and son tandem to be given that honor. Outside of your work with the NFL, you've also been very well known in Ireland for extensive philanthropy work as one of the founders of the American Ireland Funds and as principal funder of the Rooney Prize in Irish Literature. Because of your dedication to promoting peace, culture, and charity in Ireland, Ambassador Rooney was named U.S. Ambassador to Ireland in July of 2009. I also think it's important that this man of great integrity and wisdom, and a man who stayed relatively clear of politics through most of his life, saw in candidate Obama something he wanted to put his weight behind. This, of course, followed the visionary introduction of the Rooney Rule in the NFL. So you've led a life of enormous integrity, enormous wisdom, enormous success. You bring all the qualities of a person who knows how to get things done, but also knows what he wants to get done. So Ireland, in many ways, the country you've gone to now, represents a microcosm of the financial crisis. The economy had runaway growth, 6% annual growth from 1994 to 2007. It was one of the great economic stories on earth. And then, of course, it got hit harder than many countries by the financial crisis and is trying to turn to these same towns to come back. As with the global economy as a whole, Ireland must now learn the right lessons from the crisis, keeping what worked and reforming what didn't. I am greatly looking forward to hearing Ambassador Rooney's thoughts on where the Irish find themselves and where they plan to go, and the lessons that this can teach about a new global growth. And I cannot avoid a football metaphor as I pass to you with the certainty that this will not be intercepted. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. I really want to thank Fred Kempe and Gerald Cohen, co-host of the conference, for inviting me to speak this morning on this timely conference. On the way out, my wife Patricia said, "Make sure you speak up and don't mumble as you usually do." But I want to say that I am a little jet lagged, so if things go a little bit astray, I hope that Fred will come up and wake me up. The worst thing, of course, would be if I put you all to sleep, so I hope that that doesn't happen. For those who've traveled to get here, I'd like to welcome you to our hometown, Fáilte, as we say in Ireland. We are thrilled to host the G20 meeting. I can't think of a better place for the world leaders to come and discuss what to do about the global economy. Pittsburgh has seen its ups and downs. It was known for steel manufacturing industries. The steel manufacturing stopped, and jobs were scarce, and the people and companies left, and the city was in decline. The city officials, as Jim talked a little bit earlier, and the community leaders made good decisions, and now Pittsburgh is doing well again in healthcare, education, technology, special manufacturing, and service. We can learn from the Pittsburgh experience, which has mirrored the changes in the U.S. economy as it moved from manufacturing to service. I would like to start this morning by looking briefly at the global economy and the challenges facing the world leaders who are gathered here for the G20. Then I'd like to tell you about Ireland, my home for a while. Regardless of the makeup of its economy, since the end of World War II, the United States has been the main driver of the economic growth globally. Even today, America accounts for, depending on how you measure it, between 20 and 25% of the world's output. In the last 20 to 30 years, the increased rate of globalization has benefited our country greatly. However, these benefits have not only been felt in the U.S., but many other countries have seen their economies boosted by the increased trade and investment. For example, just in the past 10 years, the economies of the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, have grown rapidly. That said, their lower GDP per capita shows that they still have room to grow. The most important thing for each and every country, including the U.S., is to develop a balanced economy, one that creates sustainable growth and provides equal opportunity to its citizens. And that brings us to why we are here. to begin to shape the global economy and financial systems following the crisis. At the G20 leaders meeting last April, the countries agreed to do whatever it took to support recovery and strengthen financial supervision and regulation so that a crisis of the current magnitude does not recur. The Pittsburgh meeting is an ideal opportunity to build on the April meeting and adopt policies to move forward on several fronts, including prioritize jobs and train people for the 21st century economy, further strengthen the global financial systems, support initiatives on food security, financial access, and energy in the world's poorest countries, set the contours of a financing framework to combat climate change, and strengthen our energy security by increasing market transparencies. Fortunately, since April, clear progress has been made. The G20 output has increased in the second quarter of 2009, and growth will continue in the second half of that year. For 2010, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, expects collective G20 growth of 3.2% compared to an overall contraction of 1.1% in 2009. Despite these positive signs, we can't relax. Consumers won't be spending much because unemployment is still rising. Nobody's going to spend if they fear they're losing their jobs. The IMF noted that the greatest risk is a stalled recovery. We need to continue using all the policy tools, fiscal, monetary, and financial, to make sure this doesn't happen. Preliminary withdrawing support risk a return to recessionary conditions and the instability in the financial market. That said, there will come to a point where recovery is sustainable. Then the G20 countries will need to unwind the extraordinary support measures put in place to overcome the crisis. As recovery is established, we need to have in place a new framework that will support healthy and vibrant global economy. We hope to reach agreement on such a framework in Pittsburgh. The impact of the crisis on workers has been particularly severe. As growth returns, we need to do everything we can to ensure that employment does as well. The G20 should commit to implementing recovery plans that prioritize job growth, income support for the unemployed, and quick regaining of employment. Substantial progress has been made, and the commitments made in Washington and London to improve financial supervision and regulation. In London, we reached consensus on a global framework to reform, and we can point to many accomplishments, including the expanded scope of regulation to include previously under-regulated institutions, markets and products, strengthen prudential oversight, and enhance regulation through higher capital requirements on risky assets and off-balance sheet items, improve risk management, strengthen financial integrity by bolstering international standards in 3 areas: tax information exchange, anti-money laundering to combat financing of terrorism, and prudential oversight through expanded use of peer pressure mechanisms which measure and promote compliance with the standards. Our challenge now is to put the framework in place. The challenges posed by the crisis have highlighted the need to improve our multilateral cooperation in order to further promote global financial stability, foster sustainable development, and lift the lives of the poorest from poverty. Modernizing the international financial institutions and global development networks will be essential. I would like to add here that President Obama has energized world leaders to make the commitment to bring global financial stability to the entire world in order to guarantee an economic sustainable of the coming decades. The Irish Taoiseach may not have all the answers, and President Obama doesn't either. But the point is that both are working to solve problems. We love our democratic freedoms, In order to keep them and make things better, we have to work at it. And that's what I know the countries represented in Pittsburgh will do. Now to Ireland. Ireland is a small country, about the size of our Pennsylvania. Even though Ireland is not a G20 country, it has achieved much over the last 20 years. Some say the main export of Ireland until the 1980s was people. That changed when the Irish people from all walks of life said enough and reached a consensus of what to do about the economy. With those good decisions, Ireland caught up to and passed its European neighbors in terms of living standards. A critical component of Ireland's resurgence has been its openness to foreign direct investment and trade. Irish policymakers saw that Ireland's future depended on the openness, and the country clearly reaped the rewards from this decision. As shown by the steep economic downturn in Ireland, small countries are greatly affected by international economic conditions. However, because the world's economy is so interconnected, it works the other way too. If a small country economy collapses, the effects are felt well beyond its borders. So it behooves the larger economics to remain engaged with countries such as Ireland and offer support as needed. However, Ireland is not waiting for others to make decisions first. The government has taken many steps to put the economy right, including setting up the National Asset Management Agency, NAMA, to take property loans off the books of the banks in hope that this will enable the banks to begin lending again. In a speech by former Irish President Mary Robinson, she said, "The challenge that Ireland faces demands a comprehensive vision of what sort of society the country wants." She said that to shape a vision of how Ireland hopes to develop as a society, we need to listen to everyone who has something to contribute. Yes, the business sector and the financial experts, but also the social entrepreneurs and innovators, and the teachers who educate our children, and those who have been marginalized in the past. I mention her speech not just because I personally agree with her, but also because it includes some lessons for those assembled here and later in the week of the G20. Specifically, that we have a better chance of building a sustainable global economy if we listen to everyone who has a stake. Ireland did it once with great success, and I am convinced they will do it again. I'm equally convinced that the representatives of the G20 countries will make the right decisions. This past weekend, the Irish government sponsored the Farmley Conference, and they invited Irish people from all over the globe. At the initial session, Greg Barrett, past CEO of Intel, was most critical of Ireland regarding education, especially for the lack of engineers and science being graduated from Ireland's universities. He also included the United States for lack of engineering graduates. Now, you would know much more about that than I. I agree. We should graduate more engineers and scientists. It's important for our competition. But I believe we must upgrade the entire curriculum to support a student's ability to think. There is much downtime. Instead, we could enhance the focus for the philosophies, ethics, literature, history, language, along with math, physics, and science, and chemistry. Patricia, my wife, was a professor at Robert Morris University. 4 of our children were or are teachers. One of our daughters is a lawyer, but she was not satisfied with the education that her children were receiving and went back to school and became a teacher. There are many things we do, but the most important contribution we make is to education. It bothers me, and I'm sure many of you, whenever there are economic problems, the first thing the politicians want to consider is cutting the education budget. That is a small-minded approach. Ireland has real opportunities to be a world leader in areas of renewable energy. Ireland has some of the best wind, biomass, and ocean energy in the world. And given the government's commitment to invest in research and development, It could soon become an ideal site for innovation in this sector. Targeting renewable energy would kill 3 birds with 1 stone. It would assist Ireland in reducing its carbon emissions, improve its energy security, and importantly, build a new domestic industry. This is just another area in which the U.S. and Ireland could work together cooperatively. I leave you here. Again, I could say much more about Ireland, a wonderful country with bright people and excellent leadership. We can use Ireland as a role model and find it as a positive factor. Thank you for listening, and I hope that these thoughts will set the stage for the Pittsburgh Summit. I hope Pittsburgh will not only be the positive turning point for the economy, but will be known as the place we came together and made a better life for all. Sláinte, and God bless.